Imagine that era, a moment filled with the hot summer sun at the very end of the 19th century, specifically in the 39th year of the 19th century. At this moment, over the shores of Nome, located in the state of Alaska, the unusually prolonged northern sun shone as if illuminating the entire region with its brightness and warmth. The strip of beaches stretching along the coast was teeming with life. Thousands of American prospectors, like a swarm of excited bees, scurried across the sand, armed with picks and primitive sluice boxes they used to search for gold. Their work was continuous and intense, and the noise of their activity seemed to merge with the sound of waves crashing against the rocks. The entire area was engulfed by incredible news that spread across America like a wildfire, quickly and fiercely. The news said that right on the surface of the earth lay gold dust, accessible to those who knew how to find it. Forget about heavy mines, deep shafts, and long years of waiting. Now you could simply scoop up wealth, wash it, and become rich as if by magic. Before we move on to the main part of this story, I would like to make a small but important remark. It will be important for you to know that support in the form of likes and subscriptions is the best gratitude for the information you will receive. Thank you for your attention. Meanwhile, thousands of kilometers away from this place, in distant Russia, other events were unfolding, no less important and alarming. There, in newspaper headlines, appeared notes hinting at something much more serious and alarming than the wealth of gold. Journalists and commentators of the time wrote that the perceptions of Alaska, formed in the minds of many, were mostly incorrect and superficial. In reality, this land remained one of the most unexplored and misunderstood territories of the United States. America of that time did not just take this land from Russia, it effortlessly depleted its inexhaustible riches. And everything that was found in Alaska turned out to be not just gold, but something far more valuable and important. This became a cold and unequivocal confirmation that Tsar Alexander II made a huge mistake, missing the chance to acquire this wealth. Alaska turned out to be much richer than the Russians could imagine. This discovery caught Russia off guard, leaving it speechless. The realization of this fatal mistake came too late, and it became one of those moments that forever changed the course of history. The path of the Russian Empire towards new lands began not with aggression or conquest, but with pure curiosity and the desire to expand horizons. In the 15th century, Russian monarchs and their close associates began to realize that their lands were not limited to the European part. The borders expanded further east, and ambitions captured more and more territories. Fur traders and daring explorers ventured eastward across the vast and harsh Siberia, driven by the thirst for fur riches and the desire to access sea routes leading to distant lands. At that time, the valuable sea otter fur, one of the most coveted and profitable commodities of the era, became a key incentive for Russian merchants and adventurers. It was this that drew attention to the lands beyond the Bering Strait, where wealth and opportunities lay hidden. In the 1741, the Danish navigator Vitus Bering, serving the Russian fleet, finally confirmed that this land, now known as Alaska, was not only reachable, but also held incredible riches. By then, at the beginning of the 18th century, the Russians had begun establishing small but very strong outposts along the coast of this region. As part of this effort, the Russian-American Company, which effectively acted as a state entity, played a significant role. Looking at the historical context, it becomes clear that Britain at one time could have aimed not only to intimidate Russian possessions in the Black Sea, but also to seize Alaska. However, something prevented it from taking the next logical step, conquering this vast and at the time almost uninhabited peninsula. The perspective on geostrategy and national interests underwent profound changes over the years. In the era of Tsar Alexander II and his advisors, Alaska ceased to be seen as a promising frontier for expansion. For them, it became more of a dangerous trap than a valuable acquisition. Losing it would not only be humiliating, but would also mean a strategic defeat that would impact Russia's prestige and security. In this situation, selling Alaska seemed a reasonable and even necessary step. According to the calculations of the time, it would strengthen Russia's position on the international stage and free up resources that could be directed elsewhere. Although, of course, at that time, many considered it more a forced measure than a beneficial decision. The first cautious attempts to sell Alaska began in the early 1860s. Russia approached several European powers with such proposals, but to its surprise, none showed particular interest in this remote and seemingly useless land. At the same time, surprisingly, the United States of America showed quite a lively interest in the idea of purchasing Alaska. Secretary of State William H. Seward, a staunch advocate of U.S. expansion, had long seen in this region an opportunity to strengthen American influence in the Pacific Ocean. After the end of the American Civil War and the stabilization of the internal situation, negotiations for the acquisition of Alaska began to develop very quickly. So quickly, in fact, that by March 30th, 1867, the Americans signed an agreement to purchase this remote region for the modest sum of $7,200,000. By modern standards, this amount is roughly equivalent to $150 million. The price per acre of land was just over 2 cents, a very small amount for such vast expanses. The deal went quietly and without much fanfare, with no ceremonial celebrations. Within America and in the Russian press, there was a wave of criticism and ridicule. Many called the purchase foolish, and its supporters fanatics who decided to spend a huge amount of money on useless land. At that time, the perception of Alaska was quite pessimistic. The land seemed barren, cold, remote, and practically useless from an economic standpoint. Many considered it a huge waste of taxpayers' money, as no one saw any value in the region then. Neither side realized the wealth hidden beneath the permafrost and in the depths of this harsh land. Russia viewed Alaska as a large, sparsely populated wasteland, a desert of little value, while the United States unknowingly acquired one of the richest resource regions on the planet. Years later, when American miners began to extract minerals en masse in western Alaska, everything they unearthed would make the world, and especially Russia, reconsider their previous views on this cold and seemingly forgotten corner of the former empire. The conclusion of the deal in 1867 took place without much celebration and with great skepticism. When Secretary of State William H. Seward presented the document to Congress, many of its members were frankly puzzled. Why spend such money, today roughly $150 million, on vast stretches of frozen and sparsely populated land that most Americans couldn't even find on a map? The territory, covering an area of more than 5,000 million miles, transferred from the Russian Empire to the USA, was almost not recognized. He believed that in the future, the land of Alaska would be valued as a strategic gateway to Asian markets and as a crucial point for strengthening the United States' position in the Pacific Ocean. He foresaw that this territory would become a springboard for American trade expansion and influence in the region, as well as a key element in confronting other powers, especially Britain. For Russia, the motivation for the sale was much simpler and more practical. First and foremost, the country needed money to recover from the severe consequences of the Crimean War, which had nearly exhausted its economic resources. The restoration of the fleet, strengthening borders on the western frontier, and fulfilling external obligations required enormous financial expenditures. In such a situation, Alaska became more of a burden than a valuable asset for Russia, as it could not generate significant profit. The Russian government feared that in the event of escalating tensions in the region, Britain could easily seize the territory if its loss was not compensated. In this context, selling to the United States served two important purposes. On one hand, it allowed Russia to rid itself of a territory unsuitable for development and only causing trouble. On the other hand, it strengthened the growing American power, which could become a strong counterbalance to Britain in the global balance of power. Essentially, the deal had not only an economic component, but also a deep geopolitical meaning. It helped redistribute power in the global arena, creating new opportunities for both sides. Russia received the necessary funds to cover its debts and conduct internal reforms, as well as got rid of a territory that was essentially a source of problems. However, in America itself, the attitude towards this deal was ambiguous. Many legislators and public figures considered it a useless expenditure of state funds, as the territory seemed deserted, sparsely populated, and uninhabitable. There was no gold, no developed timber industry, nor ports valuable for trade. The land was perceived more as a distant and unnecessary edge than as an important resource. After ratification by the U.S. Senate, The official transfer of Alaska took place on October 18, 1867, in the city of Sitka. The transfer was marked by a modest ceremony. Russian soldiers lowered the imperial flag, and American military personnel raised the United States flag. The ceremony was attended by a few local residents, most of whom were Russian Orthodox clergy and fur traders of various nationalities and backgrounds. These people witnessed the symbolic transfer of power, although in practice little changed after the event. For nearly 2 decades, Alaska remained under weak and often chaotic military governance. There were no clear laws, no local government, and even less incentive for investment or development. The U.S. formally claimed ownership of the territory, but did practically nothing to develop it. Meanwhile, beneath this apparent silence and inactivity lay a true secret. The land turned out to be incredibly rich, not only strategically, but also in terms of natural resources. It held untapped mineral reserves. When American miners finally arrived in large numbers, they discovered what Russia had never sought and what became a true revelation. What they found ultimately proved so significant that it left Russia speechless. The years following the purchase of Alaska passed in the shadow of oblivion and neglect. The territory was perceived more as a military outpost than as a place attracting attention or rich in resources. Everything changed in 1880 when a wise guide from the Tlingit tribe named Chief Cowie led prospectors Richard Harris and Joe Juneau to the area. He pointed them to the rich gold deposits hidden there. This was not the first discovery made in these parts, but by the end of the 19th century, American gold seekers, attracted by the wealth promised by the untamed frontier and liberal mining laws, began actively exploring the river valleys and coasts of the Northwest. Their influx into these territories became increasingly noticeable. By 1884, the U.S. Congress had passed the first official legislative act, which established the right to govern this territory. This document was the first step in forming a legal framework that later played a crucial role in the region's development. It laid the foundation for private land claims and created prerequisites for the commercial exploitation of Alaska's wealth. At that time, federal presence on this land remained weak, but thanks to this act, the necessary legal structure emerged, which later allowed for more organized forms of extraction and entrepreneurship to develop. Most of the early gold mining operations in Alaska were placer mining. This was a very simple yet labor-intensive activity. The work involved manually digging through gravel and soil to find the precious metal, gold. It did not require complex mining equipment or large machinery, just a pickaxe, a boat, and patience. This method of mining was physically exhausting, but was considered relatively low risk since it did not require capital investment or complex technologies. Men armed with pickaxes and patience could literally strip the top layer of earth on Alaska's western territories and extract wealth directly from the ground. Rivers such as the 40-Mile River and the Yukon River became centers for small prospector camps. Tiny settlements emerged in these places, seemingly overnight, and disappeared just as quickly when luck ran out. These early prospectors did not form organized corporations or large companies. They were mostly lone adventurers, small syndicates, and seasonal workers driven by the hope of luck and wealth. Few of them managed to amass real fortunes, but their presence and activities gradually increased pressure on the federal government, which was forced to establish clearer property rights, enforce laws, and invest in infrastructure development. Over time, Alaska slowly but surely began to change and transform. At the same time, Russia, which had left this territory nearly 2 decades earlier, showed very little interest in it. Their official stance was one of complete indifference. The Russians had sold this land, considering it a burden and an unnecessary headache. At that time, the imperial government was focused on expanding its borders in Central Asia and developing industry in the European part of the country. After the sale of Alaska, no serious strategic steps were taken to explore its resources. If there was any regret, it remained hidden and was not publicly expressed. The entire situation began to change around the mid-1890s. Then telegraph messages and cargo manifests reported something more than just random discoveries of gold dust. Gradually, shipments began arriving from Alaskan ports like Sitka and San Francisco, and their value steadily increased. Trade reports increasingly mentioned places like Nome, Cooklet, and the 40-Mile River. This indicated that it was not just a single discovery of rich deposits, but a systematic flow of resources that was increasingly filling the treasury and drawing attention to the region's wealth. By the time the next chapter of history began, spurred by the Yukon Gold Rush and the rapid growth of the city of Nome, it became clear that what American prospectors had discovered was no longer just a local rumor or legend. It had become an event of continental scale, affecting the entire country. And soon, 89 years ago, at the end of the 19th century, Alaska turned into a place where a real gold rush began. The borders of this harsh, cold land became like the main gates for an endless stream of people seeking wealth and new opportunities. During that period when most gold seekers headed south to the Yukon area, where huge gatherings of people formed, significant events were occurring in the heart of Alaska. It was through the Skagway, Daya, and Chilkoot passes that the main road ran for those seeking fortune in these wild expanses. These places became a sort of gateway through which hundreds, thousands of adventurers and fortune seekers passed, hoping to get rich from the gold hidden in the Earth's depths. Meanwhile, the American Army, finding itself in a difficult position and not fully prepared for the scale of the events, hastily established outposts and fortifications. Their main task was to somehow control the chaos, which was becoming increasingly unmanageable, all-encompassing and tumultuous with each passing day. But despite the military's efforts, most prospectors, armed only with shovels, sluice boxes, and immense endurance, persistently moved toward the southern regions, hoping to find riches lying right on the surface. And those who stayed in Alaska found something completely extraordinary and stunning there: gold deposits revealed by just a few fortunate discoveries. In the 20th century, in 1898, three Scandinavian miners, Japhet Lindberg, Eric Lindblom, and John Branton, accidentally stumbled upon large gold deposits along Anvil Creek, located near the Bering Sea coast. Their discovery marked the beginning of a new era for this region. Soon, not far from this location, on the beaches near the town of Nome, vast deposits of fine gold were discovered. These deposits were so close to the Earth's surface that they could be extracted literally by hand, without resorting to complex and costly methods such as tunneling or using explosives. It was truly a revolutionary discovery. Unlike traditional gold mining methods, which required complex technologies and expenses, here only shovels, sluice boxes, and the endless endurance of the prospectors were used. This unique method of extraction, based on simplicity, opened new horizons for people. In the summer of the 19th century in 1899, over 10,000 fortune seekers gathered in Nome. The city instantly turned into a chaotic whirlpool of moving people, a center of unrestrained activity in the pursuit of new lands and wealth. They cleared the surface of western Alaska with unprecedented intensity, literally searching for gold right before everyone's eyes. The gold sand was so rich and accessible that people were panning it right in the surf zone of the beach, without bothering with complex procedures. In these conditions, numerous disputes and conflicts arose related to land rights. Claims often overlapped or were blatantly ignored, leading to chaos and constant tension. As a result, Nome quickly grew and developed, becoming the largest city in Alaska. Soon, tent cities appeared all along the coast, supply stores emerged, as well as speculators eager to profit from the boom. Every day, ships arrived from Seattle and San Francisco, bringing journalists, investors, and military officers who monitored the developments and assessed the prospects of this new wealth. Those who once considered this land a barren desert now surprisingly recognized it as a treasure trove of minerals. It turned out that the discoveries of American prospectors were not just the beginning. If at the beginning of the 20th century the gold rush could no longer fully convince Russia of the error of its decision, much more awaited it ahead. Behind the shining gold deposits lay enormous riches hidden beneath the eternal tundra and in the depths of the mountain ranges of this region. Besides gold, beneath Alaska's harsh surface were the richest reserves of copper, coal, and even oil. Black gold, whose value was becoming increasingly apparent over time. While the word gold dominated the headlines as a symbol of wealth and success, it was merely the tip of a massive icy iceberg. In reality, the deeper American prospectors delved into Alaska's depths, the clearer it became that this land concealed much more. Not just precious metals, but also rich resources capable of fueling entire industries and ensuring the country's energy security for many years to come. The first major discoveries of copper ore in Alaska were a true revelation, changing perceptions of the region's potential. In the Wrangell Mountains, on the slopes extending above the Kennecott Glacier, prospectors found a bright green mineral that absorbed light, indicating the wealth of copper ores. This mineral turned out to be high-quality copper ore, one of the richest ever found in North America. In the early 20th century, in 1900, the large Bonanza mine was established in these areas, and soon after, the Kennecott Copper Corporation was formed, specializing in copper extraction. Support from major financial groups such as J.P. Morgan and Guggenheim enabled the rapid development of this mine, turning it into one of the most profitable mining enterprises on the American continent. Between the two millennia, from 1911 to 1938, the Kennecott mine produced over 4,600,000 tons of copper, valued at more than $200 million at the time. To transport this wealth, railroad lines were built, the Copper River and Northwestern Railway. These engineering feats became true marvels of technical progress, as they had to cross frozen rivers and navigate challenging permafrost sections, requiring immense investment and effort. The investments in this project fully paid off. Copper from Kennecott not only helped electrify cities and industries, but also became a crucial link in the development of the American economy, especially in the years leading up to World War II. It was then that American miners found wealth that extended beyond simple gold, confirming the scale of resources that Russia so easily relinquished when it could have claimed them. Following copper, large coal deposits were discovered in Alaska. These riches were located near the Matanuska Valley and in the Bering River area. They promised to fuel steamships and railroads, which was especially important for the development of the region's transportation system. Despite political and legal disputes hindering the full exploitation of these deposits, the coal reserves still added to the growing list of Alaska's underestimated resources. The United States Navy, fully aware of the strategic value of this fuel, closely monitored the development of coal reserves and even considered conducting government operations for their extraction. Although the political situation made the start of industrial mining difficult, the potential of these riches remained evident. The most significant discovery, which could substantially alter the balance of power and ensure the country's energy independence, was made much later, in the mid-20th century. In the 1950s and 1960s, geologists confirmed the presence of vast oil and natural gas deposits in the northern regions near Prudhoe Bay. In 1968, the largest oil field in North America, Prudhoe Bay, was discovered. This field became a true treasure trove. The combined reserves of copper, coal, and oil in Alaska were not just a wealth of the Earth's depths. These natural resources turned into a powerful geopolitical tool that could drastically affect the balance of power between countries. Throughout the 20th century, American miners and explorers made discoveries that completely changed the perception of the significance of this remote region. What was discovered rewrote the history of the deal made in 1867. Back then, it was merely a sale agreement, one of the many land acquisition treaties during the era of American expansion. However, over time, the situation began to change. This deal turned into one of the most one-sided acts of resource acquisition in world history. For Moscow at the time, it was a silent and heavy strategic failure. All that the Russian side could ever observe in connection with this region were consequences, problems, and difficulties. Despite this, the U.S. continued to expand its exploration and extraction, and the discoveries made by American prospectors left Russia speechless. By the beginning of the 20th century, Alaska, once seen as a distant and insignificant outpost at the edge of the world, had become a true treasure trove of natural wealth. This shift in perception was caused not only by its riches, but also by its geographical location. Alaska's position on the map proved critically important, as it was at the crossroads of world civilizations, on the western border facing Asia, and in the north, near the Arctic. At this moment, it became clear that not only the extraction of resources underground was important, but also where exactly this land was located on the global map. Such a position acquired enormous significance for both the United States and the Soviet Union. Already during World War II, the strategic importance of Alaska became absolute and undeniable. In 1942, Japanese forces began bombing Dutch Harbor and captured the islands of Attu and Kiska, part of the Aleutian chain. This was the first time since the War of 1812 that enemy forces held U.S. territory. The American command responded quickly and decisively. Urgent fortifications were carried out. Airfields, radar stations, and powerful defensive structures were built throughout the chain of islands. At the same time, the construction of the Alaska Highway was completed, which in 1942 became one of the key routes for land communication with the mainland. It enabled the rapid transfer of troops and equipment to critical strategic points. The Aleutian Campaign demonstrated to the world the role of Alaska as the northern front, as a stronghold of the defensive line. The unexpected value of this region became apparent, something that Russia, in 1867, clearly did not foresee. American aircraft from bases in Alaska gained the ability to quickly reach East Asia, adding new significance to the region's strategic potential. After the war ended and peace was established, this reach became a crucial element of the new global rivalry, the Cold War. With the Soviet Union's increased control over Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Alaska turned into a vital American outpost. Its location, just 55 miles across the Bering Strait, made it one of the few places where the two superpowers almost touched. During these years, an early warning line, known as the Distant Early Warning Line, was built across the northern part of Alaska. Radar stations were installed on this line to timely detect approaching Soviet bombers. Nuclear bombers stationed at Alsen and Elmendorf bases were ready to take off within minutes and cross the pole to deliver a retaliatory strike. During the Soviet era, military strategists carefully modeled possible nuclear strike scenarios on various regions of the world, including, of course, Alaska. This remote and seemingly insignificant corner of the North American continent gradually became an important point of interest for Soviet intelligence and scientific research. Soviet scientists, working in deep secrecy, closely monitored U.S. intelligence data, especially information concerning oil reserves and mineral resources, which American authorities tried to keep under control. At the same time, state academic journals, published under strict control, quietly and carefully analyzed the scale of oil, metal, and energy resource supplies from Alaska, studying their deep potential and strategic significance. When, in the years leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, the surface of western Alaska was thoroughly explored and uncovered, it became clear that there was much more hidden there than just gold. This region, which at first glance seemed sparsely populated and remote, revealed its true values: strategic assets that were now not only armed, but also closely monitored, and their significance on the world stage became increasingly apparent. Moreover, these riches, minerals, oil, and geographical position, transformed the abandoned province into a crucial component of global politics and energy security. Alaska, which for a long time seemed unremarkable, suddenly became the cornerstone of America's strategic position on the world stage. For Russia, all this was a silent but very eloquent confirmation that this land now belonged to someone else. It was their land, yet in one moment it became a launching pad for new geopolitical games. Time showed that Alaska had probably become one of the biggest mistakes in Russia's history, a mistake that could cost dearly. In those years, the sum spent on purchasing this region, $7,200,000, seemed enormous, but in reality, it was a negligible price compared to the actual value of the resources hidden within. In the distant year of 1867, when the U.S. acquired Alaska, this amount, which many then mocked and considered a senseless expenditure, seemed too large and reckless. But as history shows, over the next 100 years, this territory repaid the investment many times over, returning it not only in the form of income, but also strategic advantage, as well as strengthening the country's sovereignty and influence. The riches discovered there were not just raw materials or oil. They became the foundation upon which one of the most profitable land deals in modern history was built. The fastest and most obvious profit came from gold. Specifically, the gold mines of Nome, Fairbanks, and Juneau, by the mid-20th century, had produced over 30 million ounces of this precious metal. At modern prices, this would exceed $60 billion. Even considering the price levels of the early 19th century, the extracted wealth far surpassed the initial investment. Not to forget silver, as well as other byproducts like copper, which was mainly mined at the Kennecott site. Before this mine closed in 1938, the profits from the copper industry amounted to more than $200 million, which helped finance the construction of railroads, electrical networks, and even ammunition production, supporting the industrial development of the U.S. during critical years of expansion. However, the largest and most significant revenues came much later, with the discovery of oil fields. Oil production began in the Prudhoe Bay area in 1977, and in the following years, Alaska produced over 17 billion barrels of oil. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline System, known as TAPS, which delivers oil from Arctic fields to the southern port of Valdez, has become one of the most important energy corridors. Today, the total value of Alaska's territory exceeds $70 billion, making it a unique national wealth fund, unlike any other U.S. state. This vast capital is formed not only from the natural resources found here, but also from significant federal government investments made for the development of infrastructure, defense, and scientific research. Over the years of owning this territory, federal authorities have invested billions of dollars in building military bases, radar reconnaissance systems, and Arctic research, which has strengthened Alaska's strategic importance in national security. The location of the territory played a crucial role in securing additional funding for the development of transportation hubs, such as highways and ports, as well as for establishing new air routes. These investments have had a long-term positive impact on the region's economy, bringing stable income and fostering the development of new industries. Today, no one disputes whether the funds spent on Alaska were worth the investment. The figures confirming the effectiveness of these investments speak for themselves and leave no doubt about their correctness. The territory, once disdainfully called barren and uninhabitable, has over the years become a source of wealth, energy, and strategic influence on the world stage, which was once hard to imagine. Russia, which sold Alaska for a price significantly less than the cost of a modern fighter jet, watched these events in silence, making no attempts to intervene or change the course of events. While Russian gold miners and resource seekers were forced to leave the surface of this land, Alaska revealed its riches, which even the Tsar could not have dreamed of in his wildest dreams. The wealth that was discovered turned out to be so valuable and significant that it left Russia speechless and made America richer, stronger, and more secure. In the modern world, as global climate changes lead to the melting of Arctic ice and competition for resources and strategic positions intensifies, Alaska continues to be a bright example of far-sighted policy and missed opportunities. The deal made in 1867, which was once perceived by many as insane and risky, has now become a model of effective resource diplomacy. Russia, once again asserting its rights in the Arctic region, has strengthened its military presence in the northern latitudes and expanded its claims to the resource-rich marine areas under the Lomonosov Ridge. At the same time, China, having declared itself a part of the Arctic arena, is actively investing in the development of polar logistics and mineral exploration. In such a tense situation, the United States continues to strengthen its infrastructure in Alaska, reactivating radar stations built during the Cold War, expanding platforms for Arctic resource development, and increasing military presence from Nome to the northern shores. Alaska's resources, oil, natural gas, rare earth metals, and rich fish stocks, are now critically important for the United States' energy security and defense strategy. However, the deeper lesson lies not only in material assets, it is about strategic patience and a long-term perspective that can justify investments initially deemed unprofitable. What American prospectors and investors found in Alaska was not just short-term profit, but a powerful cumulative potential, economic, geopolitical, and symbolic. For Russia, Alaska became a cautionary tale about the consequences of failing to properly assess the long-term value of land, its geographical position, and hidden potential. There were no breaches of treaties or deceit, just a fundamental error in evaluating the worth and prospects of this territory. When American gold seekers began extracting resources in western Alaska, they discovered not only gold, but a future that the Russian Empire, by selling this land, traded for short-term gain. More than a century later, every barrel of oil leaving Valdez, every financial reward in the form of dividends received by Alaskan residents, and every fighter jet conducting training flights over the Bering Sea serve as a quiet yet powerful reminder of what was missed in the past. These signs, these facts indicate that something important was lost or not realized in time. And although Russia may never publicly acknowledge its regret or disappointment over this, the facts remain indisputable. What American seekers and extractors found in this icy and harsh wilderness completely changed the continent's map, redrew its borders and destinies, while Russia remained silent, unable to alter the course of events or reclaim what was lost. These events are a reminder of the importance of timely decisions and how one step can change the entire picture. Your support is very important to us. We value your feedback and opinions to make our ideas and materials better and more interesting. Don't forget to click the bell to stay updated on the latest news and new content. This helps you not miss any important information or interesting videos we prepare for you.